The simple homesteader saw lights in the barn, and the hidden secret there transformed him. Arthur Miller was determined to sell the homestead where he had spent the last 40 years of his life. At 70 years old, a widower for 2 years, he felt he could no longer care for the lands that were once prosperous on his own. That's when he saw something that made him stop in his tracks on the way back home. Golden lights emanated from the old barn that had been locked for over a decade. Arthur rubbed his tired eyes, thinking he might be seeing things, but the glow remained there, shining through the cracks in the wooden planks. The homesteader's heart raced. No one had had access to that barn for years. The key had been kept in the kitchen drawer ever since Eleanor, his wife, had passed. She always said she would organize that space one day, but she never had time between the household chores and the field work. Arthur walked slowly toward the barn, his steps echoing on the packed dirt floor. The leather hat he had worn for over 20 years shielded his eyes from the strange reflection coming from inside the structure. His hands trembled slightly as he searched for the key in the pocket of his faded plaid shirt. The lock creaked as he turned the key. The heavy door opened with a groan, and Arthur had to hold onto the wall to keep from staggering at what he saw. They were not ordinary lights. Hundreds of pieces of colored glass hung from the ceiling, creating a spectacle of colors that danced with the wind coming through the door. Between the wooden beams, small mirrors reflected the late afternoon light, multiplying the golden reflections he had seen from afar. It was as if someone had transformed that simple barn into a kind of cathedral of light and color. Arthur took a few steps inside, still not believing what he was seeing. In the center of the barn, there was a wooden easel with a canvas turned toward the wall. Beside it, a small table covered with a white cloth, where brushes were organized by size and small jars with dried paint remnants. The smell of paint and varnish still lingered in the air, mixed with the scent of old wood. Arthur approached the canvas on the easel and carefully turned it around to see what was painted. They were sunflowers, dozens of them, painted with a technique he had never seen Eleanor demonstrate. The shades of yellow and orange seemed alive, as if they were moving on the canvas. In the lower right corner, there was a delicate signature, E. Miller, for my dear Arthur. Tears began to stream down the homesteader's wrinkled face. Eleanor always said she liked sunflowers, but he had never paid much attention. He was always too busy with the crops, the cattle, the problems of the homestead. Arthur looked around and saw that there were more canvases leaning against the walls. Some were covered with cloths, others stacked on top of each other. He approached a stack and began to uncover the works one by one. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out now continuing. There were paintings of every corner of the homestead, the yellow house with its blue windows, the well where they fetched water in the early years, the cows grazing in the field, even the mutt they had for 15 years. Each canvas showed a piece of the life they had built together, but seen through Eleanor's sensitive eyes. In one of the canvases, Arthur saw himself portrayed without knowing he was being observed. It was him fixing the pasture fence, with the sun on his back, focused on his work. Eleanor had even captured the sweat on his forehead and the determined expression he made when he was focused on solving a problem. At the back of the barn, on a makeshift table made of 2 planks and sawhorses, Arthur found a shoebox. Inside it, there were letters. Dozens of handwritten letters in Eleanor's careful script, all addressed to him, but never delivered. The first letter he opened was dated 3 years before Eleanor's departure. With trembling hands, Arthur began to read. My dearest Arthur, today marks 35 years of marriage, and I wanted to tell you a secret I've kept for a long time. Since I was a girl, I always dreamed of being a painter. When we got married, I put that dream away because I thought you wouldn't understand. But now, seeing you work so hard to take care of us both, I want to start painting again. I want to paint our life, our love, our homestead. I want to show you how beautiful all of this is through my eyes. Arthur had to stop reading because tears blurred his vision. He had never known about this dream of Eleanor's. All those years, she had hidden such an important part of herself, and he had never noticed. In the second letter, Eleanor wrote about how she had begun to buy painting supplies in secret, using money left over from the market. She told how she looked forward every week to coming to the barn and dedicating herself to her art, always when Arthur was busy with work in the fields. Arthur continued reading the letters, each one revealing more about the woman he had lived with for 40 years and whom he now realized he knew very little. Eleanor wrote about her doubts, her fears of not being good enough, but also about the immense joy she felt each time she finished a painting. In one of the more recent letters, she spoke about her illness. Arthur remembered those last months when Eleanor grew weaker and weaker, but always tried to hide how much she was suffering. In the letter, she wrote, "Arthur, if anything happens to me, I want you to know that these were the happiest years of my life. Not because of the illness, of course, but because I could finally be myself in this little secret corner. I painted our entire story on these canvases. I painted the love I feel for you in every sunflower, in every sunset, in every portrait of you I made in secret." The farmer sat down in an old chair in the corner of the barn and cried as he hadn't cried since the day Eleanor passed away. They were tears of sadness for the lost opportunity, but also of a strange happiness upon discovering that his wife had been so complete, so fulfilled, even if in secret. When he managed to compose himself, Arthur continued exploring the barn. He found a small diary where Eleanor noted her ideas for new paintings, recipes for color mixtures, and reflections on life. On one of the last pages she had written, "Today Arthur talked about selling the homestead when we get older. My heart ached a little, because this place is our entire story. But perhaps he's right. Maybe it really is better to move to the city near Sarah. I just hope that one day he finds this little corner of mine and understands that despite all our silences, I was happy here by his side." Sarah was their daughter, who had lived in Chicago for over 15 years. She was an accountant at a large company and always insisted that her parents sell the homestead and go live near her in the city. Especially after Eleanor passed, Sarah called almost every day insisting that Arthur make this decision. Arthur had agreed with his daughter, partly because he felt too alone on that big homestead. He had even already spoken with Richard Thompson, an old acquaintance who was interested in buying the land. Richard wanted to turn the property into a housing subdivision because the city was growing in the direction of the Miller homestead. But now, seeing all that legacy Eleanor had left behind, Arthur began to rethink his decision. How could he sell the place where his wife had found so much happiness? How could I let them tear down that barn that held so many memories and so much love? The phone rang in the house, pulling Arthur from his thoughts. He left the barn and went to answer it, still emotional from all he had discovered. It was Sarah. "Hi, Dad, how are you?" "I'm fine, honey. Something very interesting happened today." "Dad, actually I called because Richard called here saying you hadn't called him back. Remember you were supposed to finalize the sale details today?" Arthur had completely forgotten. With everything he discovered in the barn, selling the homestead had completely slipped his mind. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about this. I'm not sure I want to sell the homestead anymore." There was silence on the other end of the line. "What do you mean, Dad? You said yourself you can't take care of everything alone anymore, and it's dangerous for you to be out there isolated, far from everything." "I know what I said, honey. But today I discovered something about your mother that changed everything." "Dad, are you okay? Are you taking your medicine properly?" Arthur sighed. Sarah always got worried when he talked about Eleanor. She thought he was having trouble moving past the loss and that it was affecting his judgment. "Sarah, your mother painted. She had a secret studio in the old barn. There are hundreds of canvases here, all depicting our life. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "Dad, Mum never painted. You must be confused about something." "I'm not confused at all. There are even letters she wrote explaining everything. She always dreamed of being a painter, but she never told me." Sarah was silent for a few seconds before replying, her voice softer. "Dad, how about I come there this weekend? We can talk about this in person, okay?" "All right, honey, but I'm not selling the homestead, at least not now." After hanging up the phone, Arthur returned to the barn. The daylight was fading, but the colored glass still created magical reflections on the walls. He turned on a lamp that was in the barn and continued exploring Eleanor's works. There was a series of paintings showing the seasons on the homestead, spring with the flowering trees, summer with the tall corn in the field, autumn with the yellowed leaves, and winter with the frost covering the pasture. Eleanor had captured the beauty of each season with a sensitivity Arthur had never noticed when living those moments. In a corner of the barn, he found a canvas larger than the others, covered with a special cloth. When he uncovered it, Arthur almost lost his breath. It was a portrait of him sleeping on the porch of the house on a Sunday afternoon. Eleanor had painted every detail, the wrinkles around his eyes, the grey hairs escaping from under his hat, the peaceful expression on his face. But what moved him most was seeing how she had portrayed his hands. They were hands calloused from work, but Eleanor had painted them with such affection that they looked like the most beautiful hands in the world. It was as if she had seen beauty, where he had always seen only weariness and hard work. Arthur spent the rest of the night in the barn, discovering treasure after treasure. There were paintings of all the animals they had raised over the years, portraits of the neighbors who visited the homestead, landscapes of the fields at different times of day. Each canvas told a story, preserved a memory. When he finally returned to the house, it was past midnight. Arthur couldn't sleep. He lay in bed thinking about all the letters Eleanor had written and never sent, about all the paintings she had done in secret. How could he have lived beside her for so long without noticing this important part of her personality? The next day, Arthur called Richard Thompson and said he had changed his mind about the sale. Richard was surprised and tried to argue that it was a good financial opportunity, but Arthur was firm in his decision. "Richard, I understand your position, but this homestead has a value that cannot be measured in money. I discovered things about my wife that changed everything for me." "Arthur, are you sure? You said yourself you can't manage everything alone." "I'll figure it out. Maybe I'll hire someone to help me, I don't know, but I'm not selling." Richard was not very pleased with the decision, but said he would understand. Arthur knew he would be upset, because Richard had already made plans for the subdivision and had even spoken with investors. During the week, Arthur spent most of his time in the barn, organizing Eleanor's works and reading all the letters she had written. Each discovery made him better understand the extraordinary woman he had been married to. In one of the letters, Eleanor told of a neighbor, Mrs. Dorothy, who had come to visit her and had seen some of her paintings by chance. Mrs. Dorothy had been impressed and suggested that Eleanor try to sell some paintings at the town fair, but Eleanor was afraid that Arthur would get angry if he found out she was wasting time with that. Arthur remembered Mrs. Dorothy. She had been a great friend of Eleanor's and always came to visit them, especially in recent years. After Eleanor's passing, Mrs. Dorothy had also drifted away, perhaps because it was too painful to come to the homestead without her friend. Arthur decided to visit her. Mrs. Dorothy lived in a small house at the town entrance, about a 15-minute drive from the homestead. When he arrived, she was surprised to see him. "Arthur, what a nice surprise. How are you?" "I'm well, Mrs. Dorothy. Actually, I came here because I discovered something about Eleanor and wanted to talk to you about it." Mrs. Dorothy invited him in and made coffee. She was a 68-year-old lady, widowed for 10 years, who had always been very close to Eleanor. "Mrs. Dorothy, did you know that Eleanor painted?" Mrs. Dorothy's face lit up, but then grew a little concerned. "Oh, you discovered her studio?" "So you knew?" "Of course I knew, Arthur. Eleanor showed me her paintings a few times. She had an incredible talent. I always told her to tell you, but she was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid you would think it was silly. Afraid you would get angry because she was wasting money on paint and brushes. You know how you were, Arthur. Always very serious, always worried about work and money." Arthur lowered his head. It was true. He had always been very focused on the practical matters of life, never giving much value to things he considered superfluous. "Eleanor even showed me some letters she wrote to you, but never delivered. She wanted so much to share this side of herself with you, but was afraid of your reaction. I never thought she could be hiding something like this from me. We talked about everything." "You talked about the homestead, about practical problems, about Sarah, but about dreams, about deeper feelings. You never talked much about that, did you?" Arthur knew Mrs. Dorothy was right. He and Eleanor had a solid marriage, based on companionship and mutual respect. But perhaps they didn't have that deeper emotional intimacy. Eleanor was a true artist, Arthur. I always told her to look for someone to teach painting in town, but she said she was already too old to start. Did she teach herself? Not entirely by herself. She bought some art magazines, even watched some programs on television. And she had a cousin, Margaret, who also painted. They exchanged letters about painting techniques. Arthur remembered cousin Margaret. She had come to Eleanor's funeral, but they hadn't talked much. Margaret lived in a neighboring town and had always seemed a bit different to Arthur, perhaps because she was also an artist. "Mrs. Dorothy, do you think I should talk to Margaret?" "I do. She knew that side of Eleanor better than anyone, and I'm sure she'd be happy to know you discovered the studio." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Arthur thanked Mrs. Dorothy and returned home with a lot of new information. On Friday, Sarah arrived for the weekend, as promised. She drove up in her small car, loaded with bags of food from the city. "Hi, Dad. You look better than I expected." "Why do you say that?" "Oh, I don't know. On the phone you sounded kind of confused about this whole mom painting thing." "Sarah, come with me. I want to show you something." Arthur led his daughter to the barn. When he opened the door and Sarah saw that whole spectacle of light and color, she was left speechless. "Good heavens! What is all this?" "This is all your mother's legacy, my dear. She painted for years and I never knew." Sarah entered the barn as if stepping onto sacred ground. She looked at each canvas with an expression of mixed astonishment and emotion. "Dad, it's impossible. Mom never showed any interest in art. She never said a word about it to me. She didn't tell me either. But it's all here, Sarah, the paints, the brushes, the letters she wrote explaining everything." Arthur showed the letters to his daughter. Sarah read a few of them, and with each letter, her astonishment grew. "Dad, I can't believe Mom kept this a secret for so long." "I know, and now you understand why I don't want to sell the homestead anymore." Sarah was quiet for a few minutes, absorbing everything she was seeing. She approached a canvas that showed herself as a child, playing in the homestead's backyard. Eleanor had captured a specific moment. Sarah, at 7 years old, chasing a chicken that had escaped the coop. "I remember this day," said Sarah, her voice choked. "The chicken got out and I chased it all day. Your mother remembered everything, my dear. Every moment of our life is depicted here." Sarah kept looking at the paintings, growing more and more emotional. There were paintings of her at various ages, as a child, a teenager, a young adult. Eleanor had documented her daughter's growth through art. "Dad, this is all incredible. But you also have to think about the practical side. How will you manage the homestead alone? And what will you do with all these paintings?" "I don't know yet, Sarah. I just know I can't sell this place. It would be like betraying your mother's memory." "Dad, selling the homestead wouldn't be betraying Mom's memory. She even wrote in those letters that she'd understand if you wanted to do that." "But that was before I discovered all this. If I had known back then, if she had told me—" "Dad, it's no use torturing yourself with what-ifs. What's done is done. The important thing now is to decide what to do from here on out." That night, father and daughter talked until very late about Eleanor, about the art she had left behind, about the future of the homestead. Sarah was visibly moved by the discovery, but still thought Arthur should reconsider the sale. "Dad, why don't you take some of the paintings to Chicago? I can make room in my house. That way you don't lose Mom's legacy, but you also don't stay here alone." "It's not the same, Sarah. These paintings were born here. They are a part of this place. Taking them away would be like uprooting a plant from the soil." On Saturday morning, Sarah helped her father organize Eleanor's studio better. They sorted the paintings by theme and chronology, trying to understand Eleanor's artistic evolution over the years. "Dad, look at how Mom's style changed over time. The early paintings are simpler, but the latest ones are true works of art." It was true. Eleanor had evolved greatly as an artist. The more recent paintings showed a refined technique and an impressive sensitivity for capturing light and movement. "Sarah, do you think your mother was really good at what she did, or am I being too emotional?" Dad, I don't understand much about art, but anyone can see these paintings are special. Mom had real talent. While organizing the canvases, they found more things hidden in the barn. There was a notebook where Eleanor wrote down her observations about nature, detailed descriptions of the sky's colors at different times, studies on how the light changed with the seasons. In a small box, they found several letters that Cousin Margaret had sent to Eleanor. In the letters, Margaret gave technical advice about painting and always encouraged Eleanor to show her work to more people. Eleanor, you have a special talent for portraying everyday life with poetry. Your paintings show that beauty is everywhere, even in the simplest moments, said one of Margaret's letters. Sarah suggested they call Cousin Margaret. Arthur hesitated at first, but ended up agreeing. Margaret was very emotional when she learned that Arthur had discovered Eleanor's studio. Arthur, I always told Eleanor that one day you would discover and be proud of her talent. She was so afraid of your reaction. Margaret, I want to apologize for not valuing this when Eleanor was alive. If I had known. Arthur, don't blame yourself. Eleanor was happy painting, even if it was in secret. What matters is that you've discovered it now and are valuing her legacy. Margaret said she had taught Eleanor some basic techniques by letter, but that most of Eleanor's learning had been self-taught. She had a thirst for learning that I've never seen matched. She bought books, magazines, watched every art program that came on television, and she practiced a lot, a whole lot. Margaret, do you think these paintings have value? I mean, real commercial value? Arthur, I think so. Eleanor developed a very unique, very authentic style. There are people who would pay well for paintings like these. This information left Arthur thoughtful. He had never considered that Eleanor's paintings could have commercial value. For him, the value was purely sentimental. Sarah became interested in the possibility of the paintings having commercial value. She suggested they look for an art appraiser in the city. Dad, if Mom's paintings are really worth something, maybe you could sell some and have some extra income. That way you wouldn't need to worry so much about the costs of maintaining the homestead. Arthur didn't much like the idea of selling Eleanor's paintings, but he understood his daughter's practical point of view. On Sunday, before Sarah returned to Chicago, they received an unexpected visit. It was Richard Thompson, accompanied by a man Arthur didn't know. Arthur, I brought Dr. Collins here, who is a lawyer. He wanted to talk to you about selling the homestead. Arthur was bothered by the visit. He had already told Richard he didn't want to sell anymore, but apparently Richard hadn't given up. Mr. Arthur, said the lawyer, Richard told me you changed your mind about the sale, but I wanted to explain that this could cause some problems. What kind of problems? Well, Richard has already made several investments based on the promise to purchase your property. He paid for feasibility studies, subdivision plans, even made a down payment on some equipment. Arthur knew nothing about this. Richard had never mentioned he was already investing money before closing the deal. Richard, we haven't signed anything yet. I haven't officially committed to anything. That's true, Arthur. But you know we've been friends for a long time. When you said you wanted to sell, I took you at your word and started getting my affairs in order. The situation became awkward. Arthur felt guilty that Richard had spent money, but at the same time, he didn't want to give up the homestead. Sarah intervened in the conversation. Richard, my father has the right to change his mind. You didn't sign any contract. That's true, Sarah, but maybe we can reach an agreement. Arthur, how about if I bought just a part of the homestead? You could keep the part with the house, and I'll take the rest. Arthur became thoughtful. The proposal wasn't all bad, but he would have to think carefully about which part of the homestead he could part with. Richard, I need to think about this more. Give me a few days. Of course, Arthur, but don't take too long, okay? My investors are getting anxious. After Richard and the lawyer left, Sarah talked with her father about the proposal. Dad, maybe it's a good idea. You keep the house and a portion of the land. You'll have money from the sale to live on, and Richard doesn't take a loss. Could be, daughter, but I have to look very carefully at what he wants to buy. If it's the part with the barn, then that's a no-go. Sarah laughed at her father's concern over the barn, but she understood that space had become very important to him. The following week, Arthur was alone again at the homestead. but now with a completely different perspective. He spent most of his time in the barn, contemplating Eleanor's works and reading the letters she had written. In one of the letters, Eleanor spoke about a dream she had. "Arthur, I dream that one day this barn will become a place where other people can also come to paint. I imagine art discussion circles, people sharing techniques, children learning to see beauty in the world. It would be as if our love multiplied through art." This letter gave Arthur an idea. What if he turned the barn into a community arts center, a place where people from the area could come to learn painting and share artistic experiences? The idea was bold, especially for someone who had never been interested in art. But Arthur felt it would be a way to honor Eleanor's memory and at the same time give new life to the homestead. He called Mrs. Dorothy and told her his idea. She was enthusiastic about the proposal. "Arthur, what a wonderful idea. Eleanor would be so happy if she knew. And I know several people here in town who would be interested." "Mrs. Dorothy, do you think I could run something like that? I don't understand anything about art." "Arthur, you don't need to understand art to organize a community arts center. You can hire someone to teach the classes, and you handle the administrative side." The idea began to take shape in Arthur's mind. He could use part of the money from selling a portion of the homestead to invest in the arts center project. It would be a way to generate income and at the same time preserve Eleanor's legacy. On Thursday, Arthur received a call from his cousin Margaret. She was planning to visit the area over the weekend and wanted to see Eleanor's studio in person. "Arthur, I'm very curious to see Eleanor's paintings. From the letters she sent me, I knew she was evolving a lot, but I never imagined it was this much. Margaret, you'll be impressed. I myself still can't believe she managed to create all of that in secret. Arthur, may I make a suggestion? How about we organize a small exhibition with Eleanor's works? I'm sure many people would be interested in getting to know her work." The idea of an exhibition made Arthur nervous. He was still getting used to the discovery of the paintings and didn't feel ready to share it with many people. "Margaret, I don't know. It's all still so recent." "I understand, Arthur. It doesn't need to be anything big. Maybe just for the closest friends, the neighbors. Eleanor deserves to be known as the talented artist she was." Arthur promised to think about Margaret's suggestion. In truth, the more he thought about it, the more the idea made sense. Eleanor had painted for years without anyone seeing her work. Perhaps it was time to give her the recognition she deserved. On Saturday, Margaret arrived at the homestead. She was a vibrant, energetic 62-year-old woman. When she saw Eleanor's studio, she was moved to tears. "Arthur, this is a treasure. Eleanor created magnificent works. Look at this series of landscapes. She managed to capture the soul of your homestead." Margaret was an art connoisseur, and her approval meant a lot to Arthur. She spent hours analyzing each painting, explaining to Arthur the techniques Eleanor had used and how she had developed her own style. "Eleanor had a special eye for color, Arthur. See how she used shades of blue to create depth in this landscape. And look at this play of light and shadow in this portrait of you. It's impressively sensitive. Margaret, do you really think these paintings are good, or are you just being kind?" "Arthur, I wouldn't be kind about something so important. Eleanor was a true artist. These works deserve to be seen and admired." Margaret suggested they select the best paintings for a small exhibition. She offered to help with the organization and even to promote the event in the area. "Arthur, what do you think about holding the exhibition right here at the homestead, in the very barn where Eleanor painted? It would be very symbolic." The idea of turning the barn into a temporary gallery pleased Arthur. It would be a way to preserve the spirit of the place where Eleanor had been so happy. "Margaret, how does one put on an exhibition? I have no idea where to start." "It's simpler than you think. We select the works, prepare the space, make a guest list, and organize an opening day. I can help you with everything." They spent Sunday selecting the paintings to be displayed. Margaret chose 25 works that represented different phases and themes of Eleanor's work. "Let's make 3 groups," explained Margaret. "Homestead landscapes, portraits of family and friends, and still lifes. That way people can understand the variety of Eleanor's work." Arthur was impressed with Margaret's organization. She had worked on several exhibitions throughout her life and knew exactly what to do. "Arthur, let's schedule the exhibition for 2 weeks from now. That gives us time to prepare everything properly. That week, Arthur called Sarah and told her about the exhibition plans. She was excited by the idea. "Dad, that's great. I'll try to come for the opening. I want to see how people react to Mom's paintings." Arthur also called Mrs. Dorothy and some close neighbors, inviting them to the exhibition. The news spread quickly through the area, and many people showed interest in seeing Eleanor's work. The town mayor, who had known Eleanor, even offered to help promote the event. He thought the initiative was very interesting and said it could be the start of a cultural movement in the area. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Margaret returned on Tuesday with materials to prepare the exhibition. She brought supports for the canvases, proper lighting, and even small plaques with information about each work. "Arthur, we're going to turn this barn into the most charming gallery in the area," said Margaret, excited. They worked for 3 days organizing the space. Arthur was surprised by his own dedication to the project. He, who had never been interested in art, was now completely involved in preparing an exhibition. In the process of organizing, they discovered more hidden treasures in the barn. A box with preliminary studies for various paintings, showing how Eleanor planned each work. Another box with photographs she used as reference for her paintings. "Eleanor was very methodical in her creative process," observed Margaret. "She studied every detail before starting to paint." On Thursday, Richard Thompson appeared at the homestead again. He was curious about all the activity he had seen during the week. "Arthur, what's going on here? I've seen some different folks around." "Richard, we're organizing an exhibition of Eleanor's paintings. I discovered she was an artist and left many works." Richard was surprised by the news. He had known Eleanor for many years, but never knew she painted. "Arthur, that's interesting, but you haven't forgotten our conversation about selling the homestead, right?" "I haven't forgotten, Richard. In fact, I want to talk to you about that. What if I sold only the back portion of the property, the part with the house and this barn I want to keep?" Richard became thoughtful. The proposal wasn't exactly what he wanted, but perhaps it was better than getting nothing. "Let me talk to my investors, Arthur. I'll see if they'll agree to this idea." On Saturday, the day of the exhibition opening, Arthur woke up nervous. He didn't know what to expect and kept worrying about people's reaction to Eleanor's paintings. Margaret arrived early for the final preparations. She brought flowers from her garden to decorate the barn and prepared a short text about Eleanor's life and work to be read at the opening. "Arthur, everything is perfect. Eleanor would be proud to see her work presented like this." Sarah arrived from Chicago at lunchtime, accompanied by 2 friends who were also interested in art. She was impressed by the transformation of the barn. "Dad, I can't believe this is the same place where we found the paintings 2 weeks ago. It's become a real museum." The first people began to arrive at 2 in the afternoon. Mrs. Dorothy came with several friends from town. The mayor arrived accompanied by the Secretary of Culture. Several neighbors from the area also appeared, curious to learn about Eleanor's work. Arthur was moved to see people's reactions to the paintings. Many couldn't believe that Eleanor had created all of that without anyone knowing. "Mr. Arthur," said Mrs. Maria, an old neighbor, "I had known Eleanor for over 20 years and never imagined she had all this talent hidden away." A young art teacher from the town school was particularly impressed with Eleanor's work. "Mr. Arthur, these paintings are truly special. Eleanor had a very distinct style. It would be interesting if we could take some of these works to the school to show the children." The teacher's suggestion gave Arthur another idea. Perhaps he could lend some paintings to schools and other institutions in the area as a way to share Eleanor's work. During the exhibition, several people approached Arthur to share memories of Eleanor and to praise his initiative in organizing the show. "Arthur," said the mayor, "have you thought about turning this into a permanent cultural center? The region needs more initiatives like this." The idea of a cultural center was exactly what Arthur had been thinking, but he hadn't told anyone about his plans yet. "Mayor, actually, I am thinking of something like that. I want to transform this barn into a community arts center where people can come to learn painting." What a fantastic idea. "If you need any support from the city, you can count on me." Margaret heard the conversation and was excited about the possibility of Arthur receiving official support for his project. Arthur, with the city's support, the Community Arts Centre project could become a reality much faster. In the late afternoon, as the exhibition was ending, Arthur gave a short speech to thank everyone for coming. "Folks, I want to thank you all for being here today. Discovering my Eleanor's talent was one of the biggest surprises of my life. During 40 years of marriage, I never knew I lived beside such a talented artist." Arthur paused, emotional. "Eleanor was always a special woman, but now I see she was even more special than I ever imagined. She managed to find beauty in every detail of our simple life here at the homestead." Many people were moved by Arthur's words. Some had tears in their eyes. "I've decided I won't let Eleanor's work stay hidden ever again. I'm going to turn this barn into a community arts centre, where other people can discover the artist within themselves, just like Eleanor did." The announcement was met with enthusiastic applause. Several people offered to help with the Community Arts Centre project. After everyone had left, Arthur, Sarah, and Margaret stayed in the barn talking about the success of the exhibition. "Dad, I've never seen you so excited about something. Will the Community Arts Centre project really work out?" "Sarah, I've never been so sure of anything in my life. I feel this is what Eleanor would have wanted me to do." "Arthur," said Margaret, "if you want, I can help organise the centre. I can teach painting classes here on weekends." Margaret's offer was exactly what Arthur needed. She had experience teaching art and knew Eleanor's work well. "Margaret, that would be perfect. With your help, I'm sure the project will succeed." The following week, Arthur sought out Richard to finally discuss the sale of the homestead. Richard had spoken with his investors, and they had agreed to buy only the back portion of the property. "Arthur, we have a deal then. You keep the house, the barn, and about 5 acres around it. We'll buy the rest for the price we agreed on, proportional to the size." Arthur was satisfied with the agreement. He would have enough money to support himself and still invest in the Community Arts Centre project, without losing the part of the homestead that truly mattered to him. With the money from the sale, Arthur began renovating the barn to turn it into a proper arts centre. He installed more windows to improve natural lighting, put down more suitable flooring, and organised spaces for different artistic activities. Margaret helped him buy quality art supplies: paints, brushes, canvases, easels. They created a special space to permanently display some of Eleanor's works, as inspiration for future students. 1 month after the exhibition, the Eleanor Miller Creative Arts Centre was inaugurated. 10 people signed up for the first painting classes, taught by Margaret on Saturday mornings. Among the students were Mrs. Dorothy, the young schoolteacher, a retiree from the city who had always wanted to learn to paint, and even Sarah, who decided to spend weekends at the homestead to take the classes. "Dad," said Sarah during the first class, "I think I inherited a bit of Mum's artistic talent. I'd never tried painting before, but I'm really enjoying it." Arthur was moved to see his daughter discovering a passion for art, just as Eleanor had. The classes became a success in the area. Each month, more people became interested in participating. Arthur also organised monthly exhibitions of the students' work, always in the barn where Eleanor had painted her pieces. 6 months after the discovery of Eleanor's paintings, Arthur received an unexpected visit. It was an art dealer from Chicago who had heard about Eleanor's work through Margaret's network of contacts. "Mr. Arthur, I came here because I became interested in your wife's paintings. From the photos I saw, she had exceptional talent." The dealer, named Julian, evaluated some of Eleanor's works and was impressed by the technical quality and originality of the style. "Mr. Arthur, I would like to include some of Eleanor's works in a group exhibition I'm organizing in Chicago. It's a show of self-taught Brazilian artists." The proposal was tempting, but Arthur hesitated. He had grown accustomed to having all of Eleanor's works there at the homestead. "Julian, I need to think more about this. Eleanor's paintings are very important to me." "I understand completely, Mr. Arthur, but consider that it would be a way to give Eleanor the recognition she deserves. Her work would be seen by many people who truly understand art." Sarah, who was present for the conversation, thought it would be a good opportunity. "Dad, maybe it really is interesting. Mum always wanted her work to be recognized." "Julian, if I agree to lend some works, would they come back here after the exhibition?" "Of course, Mr. Arthur. It would only be a temporary loan, and I commit to taking care of the pieces as if they were my own." Arthur ended up agreeing to lend 5 of Eleanor's paintings for the exhibition in Chicago. They selected the works that best represented the unique style she had developed. The exhibition in Chicago was a success. Several art magazines mentioned Eleanor's work, describing her as a rural artist of exceptional talent who managed to develop her own language far from traditional artistic centers. An art critic wrote, "The works of Eleanor Miller show that artistic talent can flourish anywhere, as long as there is passion and dedication. Her paintings capture the essence of Brazilian rural life with an impressive poetic sensitivity." The critical recognition of Eleanor's work left Arthur proud, but also a bit melancholy. He thought about how happy Eleanor would have been to know her work was being admired by art experts. During the exhibition in Chicago, several people expressed interest in buying Eleanor's works. Julian called Arthur to inform him of the offers. "Mr. Arthur, people are offering quite interesting amounts for Eleanor's paintings. One of the landscapes is being contested by 3 collectors." Arthur was surprised by the commercial interest in Eleanor's works. He had never thought of them as merchandise, but began to understand they truly had value in the art market. "Julian, I don't know if I want to sell Eleanor's paintings. They have great sentimental value to me." "I understand, Mr. Arthur, but consider that the money from the sale could help maintain the community arts center you created. It would be a way for Eleanor to continue helping other people discover art." Julian's suggestion made sense to Arthur. He decided to sell 3 of Eleanor's less personal paintings, keeping for himself those that depicted more intimate family moments. The money from the sale was invested entirely in the community arts center. Arthur bought more materials, hired another teacher to give classes during the week, and even created a small fund to help low-income people participate in the activities. 1 year after the discovery of Eleanor's paintings, the Eleanor Miller Creative Arts Center had become a cultural reference in the region. More than 50 people had already participated in the activities, and several of them discovered artistic talents they didn't know they possessed. Arthur, who had once been a homesteader focused solely on practical matters, had transformed into a cultural promoter. He organized events, welcomed visitors interested in Eleanor's history, and had even begun to paint his own canvases, encouraged by Margaret. "Arthur," said Margaret during one of the lessons, "you have a knack for painting. Eleanor would be surprised to know you have artistic talent too." "Margaret, I think Eleanor always knew I had this side. I just never let it show." Sarah, who now spent every weekend at the homestead, had become a dedicated painter. She discovered she had inherited her mother's sensitive eye for color and form. "Dad, I think about Mom a lot when I'm painting. It's as if she's here with me, guiding me." "Sarah, I'm sure she is. Eleanor planted a seed of art on this homestead, and now it's growing in every person who paints here." One Sunday afternoon, while organizing some new works from the students at the Arts Center, Arthur found a letter Eleanor had written that they hadn't discovered before. It was hidden inside one of the art books she used to study. The letter was different from the others. In this one, Eleanor wasn't talking about her insecurities or fears. She was confident, happy. "Arthur, today I painted my best work. It's a portrait of us, the 2 of us, sitting on the house porch on a Sunday afternoon. I managed to capture the love that exists between us, the peace we found in this simple life. If one day you find this letter and this studio, know that I was completely happy here. I was happy as your wife, as Sarah's mother, as the mistress of this house. And I was happy as an artist, painting our story with all the colors love can have." Arthur searched for the painting Eleanor mentioned in the letter. He found it stored in a special place, carefully wrapped. When he unwrapped it, he saw it was truly the most beautiful work Eleanor had created. It was a portrait of the 2 of them on a Sunday afternoon, exactly as she had described. Eleanor had managed to capture not just their physical appearance, but all the harmony and complicity that existed between the couple. Arthur decided that painting would never leave the homestead. It was the symbol of the love he and Eleanor had built there, of the legacy she had left, and of the new life he had found through art. On the 2nd anniversary of the discovery of Eleanor's paintings, Arthur organized a big party at the homestead. Former students from the Arts Center came, people who had known Eleanor, art critics who had become interested in her work, and many new friends Arthur had made through the art world. During the party, Arthur gave an emotional speech. 2 years ago, I was a lonely widower, ready to sell this homestead and move to the city. Today, I am a completely different person. I discovered my wife was a brilliant artist. I discovered I also have a talent for art. And most importantly, I discovered it's never too late to start over. Arthur paused and looked at the transformed barn, full of happy, creative people. Eleanor always said she wanted this place to be a place of joy and creation. Looking at all of you here today, I know her dream has come true. This is no longer just a barn where we stored tools. It's a place where people discover they are capable of creating beauty. The party went on into the late hours. People of all ages painted, talked about art, shared experiences. Arthur watched everything with a smile on his face, feeling that Eleanor would be proud to see how her secret passion had transformed into something so much greater. Sarah approached her father at the end of the party. "Dad, I want to tell you something. I've decided to quit my job in Chicago and come live here at the homestead with you." Arthur was surprised by his daughter's decision. "Sarah, but what about your career? You built a life for yourself there in the city." "Dad, I built a career but not a life. Here at the homestead, painting, helping with the art center, I feel more fulfilled than I ever felt working with numbers." "But honey, how will you support yourself here?" "Dad, I was thinking about expanding the art center. We could offer art classes during the week too, host school groups for educational visits, even organize artistic retreats for people from the city who want to spend a few days painting in the countryside." Sarah's idea was excellent. With her administrative experience and her newly discovered passion for art, she could take the Art Center project to a professional level. "Sarah, it would be wonderful to have you here with me, and I'm sure your ideas will make the Art Center grow even more." Months later, the Eleanor Miller Creative Arts Center had become a regional reference in art education. Sarah had created different programs, classes for children on Saturday afternoons, intensive weekend courses for adults, special workshops for seniors, and even a training course for people who wanted to become art teachers. The homestead, which was once an isolated and quiet place, had transformed into a vibrant cultural center. Every day, people arrived seeking knowledge, creativity, and inspiration. Arthur, at 72 years old, had found a new reason to live. He woke up every day excited about the Art Center's activities, the new students, the artistic discoveries he witnessed daily. In his own paintings, Arthur had developed a unique style, influenced by Eleanor's sensitivity but with his own personality. His works mainly depicted rural scenes and portraits of the people who frequented the Art Center. Margaret, who was now the head teacher at the Art Center, always commented on Arthur's artistic evolution. "Arthur, you have an impressive natural talent." Eleanor knew very well the sensitive man she had married. "Margaret, I think this side always existed in me. Eleanor is the one who awakened it, even after she was gone." The Art Center had become financially self-sustaining. Course tuition fees, the sale of works by advanced students, and some donations from people who supported the project covered all the maintenance and even allowed for investments in improvements. Julian, the art dealer from Chicago, had become a close friend of the family. He organized annual exhibitions with the best works from the Art Center's students, always reminding everyone that it all started with the discovery of Eleanor's hidden talent. "Arthur," said Julian during one of his visits, "what happened here is a rare phenomenon, an artistic legacy that multiplied and transformed into a genuine cultural movement." 3 years after the discovery of Eleanor's paintings, Arthur received an unexpected phone call. It was a journalist from a national magazine who wanted to do a story about the Art Center's history. "Mr. Arthur, the story of Eleanor and the transformation of your homestead into a cultural center is very inspiring. We would like to share it with the whole country." The article was published with great prominence, telling the entire story from the discovery of the golden lights in the barn to the creation of the Community Arts Center. The story had a huge impact, and people from various parts of the country began seeking out the Art Center. With the increased demand, Arthur and Sarah had to expand the activities even further. They created an artist residency program where artists from other regions could spend a season at the homestead, creating works inspired by the rural environment. The project's success caught the attention of universities and art institutes. Several institutions partnered with the center, sending students for internships and developing research on folk art and art education in a rural setting. Eleanor, who in life had hidden her talent out of fear and insecurity, had become, through her legacy, a reference in the democratization of art education in Brazil. On a quiet afternoon, while watching a group of children painting in the barn, Arthur reflected on all the transformations that had happened in his life. 3 years earlier, he was a man embittered by loss, ready to abandon everything he had built. Now, he was a fulfilled man, surrounded by art, creativity, and people who shared the passion that Eleanor had planted in that simple place. The barn that once stored farm tools now housed dreams, talents, and the continuation of a love that had become eternal through art. Arthur picked up a brush and joined the children in their creations. As he painted, he could feel Eleanor's presence beside him, proud to see how her secret had transformed into the most precious gift she could have left for the world. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this moving story of discovery and transformation. Do you believe Arthur made the right decision in preserving Eleanor's artistic legacy? How would you feel upon discovering a hidden talent of a beloved person who has passed away? Leave your sincere comment about this journey of love, art, and new beginnings. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the heart.